when you get a lead, kind of some questions to ask, what to do. Touring tips. Number 4 is going to be probably something that you guys are probably very interested in, and that is getting paid. You've got your lead. Woo! You've got your lead. You've got them to lease. They moved in. Now what? Okay, now you're chomping at the bits because you got one lease and you're like, okay, when is it going to pay? Did it pay today? Is it going to pay tomorrow? Has it paid yet, Pam? Or did you check the mail? Has it paid yet? I was the same way as an agent, and even whenever I was an assistant to a broker, my favorite part of the day was checking the mail. Even if it wasn't for me, I was so excited for somebody because they're like, yes, you got to check in. And it's life-changing. It's kind of funny. So with this, so I went through it. We have an example in your packet. There's going to be a lease verification form if you want to look at this. This is a template. You guys can kind of, alter it to kind of fit your personality, but it's super easy to maneuver through. This is going to be what you get in writing, because you want to make sure that you get them to fill this out, because sometimes communities will change their commission structure, or they'll change management companies, or they'll change completely new owners, and so it's important to have that information in writing. So you're going to see on here you have the property's name, the tenant's name, and you literally you'll have this with your information on it. It'll be blank. You'll put the community name on it, but you'll let that apartment complex fill everything out in writing, so that way you can verify the client's name, like their address, their apartment number, their move-in date, and what the rental amount is, and then if they put you down as a referral source, and what the commission is. So that's going to be and help you to ensure that you get paid. So as soon as you find out that they've leased, or if they submitted an application, you want to submit this right away, because that way in case for some reason if they were paying 200% commission right now, and then maybe a few weeks later, they find if you didn't call to verify that, and then you call them then, they could have changed it, and then they say, oh yeah, we're only paying 25%, but if you didn't call them a week before when they leased, then you wouldn't have known that they were actually paying 200%. So you want to get that information as soon as you can to ensure that you get the most that you can out of it. And again, because sometimes they can change their structure. So in order to get paid, you have to make sure that your name is listed on the guest card and the application when the client tours. Again, if your client forgets, make sure they send an email immediately, so that way it's in writing. Once you have this information, please send over the lease verification and the invoice. You can generate an invoice in Smart Locating and ALN, and we can go over that as well in detail a little bit later during our boot camp. But you'll be able to submit that or generate it in ALN, and then you will send it to billing@core1realestate.com to ensure that the invoice is processed right away.
What was that email address again?
Billing@core1realestate.com.
Okay.
And so once your client moves in, we can submit the invoice. Most communities require that we become a vendor with their company in order for us to get paid. It's kind of a pay to play per se, like they'll make me pay a fee just to become a vendor, and then they'll pay me, but not until I've paid first. So once you guys can set the faster that you send me your invoices, then I can make sure that we were set up as a vendor, so we can get you paid as soon as possible. Once we've submitted the invoice and we've been set up as a vendor, typically you should receive payment within 30 to 90 days. That always varies depending on the company. So you could have some that pay in 2 weeks, and you're like, ooh, that was quick. But then you get another lease and it's 91 days, and you're like, oh, they have not paid me yet. What's taking so long? And that just happens. It's the nature of the beast, so don't get too discouraged. That's another reason why it's important to get as many as you can, because then you're not focusing on, oh my gosh, I only have 2 and I have to get my mortgage paid. And if that 2 doesn't pay, then I'm up a creek. So you want to, that's again one reason why it's important to get as many invoices as you can to build up that savings account per se, because then you have more frequent invoices coming in or checks coming in. We do also strive to help with collections. We'll send the invoice and we'll contact them to make sure they've got it. But we also are going to send you a copy too, so that way you can be proactive and check with them to make sure they've received that as well on your end. The faster you get the invoice, the faster we get them to be paid, then the faster we can put money into your pocket. So it's kind of a teamwork aspect of it, but we definitely want to help you guys get paid too. But that's always something important, just to make sure that we kind of do it together.
Also, it's very important when they call you or when you're doing your weekly calls, and they said that they lease somewhere, it's very important to get all that information right then and there, instead of waiting to get it later, because they might forget, or you might not be able to get a hold of them again to get that information.
It's so true, yes, that is, and it's happened more than once. You're like, you know, you're like, oh yeah, I leased, and you're like, okay, great, and then you call and you just never get them on the phone, or the property never, the property will say, oh, well, do you have the apartment number that your client leased? And you're like, well, crap, I don't have that, and then you call, and so it's a nightmare, and it makes it harder to get paid, so if you get them, like that's the last time you're ever gonna get them on the phone, even though probably not, but you never know. So that's so important.
So when you're making calls, don't make them from your car, when you're driving down the highway, make them when you're sitting at your desk or somewhere where you have a pen and paper, because all too many times does that happen, that you are talking to clients driving down the road and then you're like, oh man,
Yeah.
they just want that because they
And
can't
it's
write it
not
down.
safe to be on the phone.
Well, that's true too. I have hands-free in my car, so I do a lot of calls when I'm driving down the road, but make sure that when you're doing that, when you're following up with people, that you can
Make
sit down and
sure you
write.
be safe.
Yeah, be safe, safety first, but also make notes. The more information you write down, the easier it is gonna be whenever they call you back. For instance, when you have a repeat customer, it's gonna be more impressive to them when they're like, oh, hey, Susie, yeah, I would love to help you again. I remember, just to recap, you had an eviction from 2 years ago, but then last year you told me that you paid it off, so now we're looking for X, Y, and Z. Instead of saying, okay, can you tell me again what you're looking for? What was the situation? It just makes them feel like you kind of are more aware of them whenever they call you back versus having to, and it saves you a lot of time too, because then you're not having to ask as many questions. And you can just verify that information is true and correct versus having to get them to get all that information to you guys. Number 5 is follow up, follow up, follow up. The first bullet point is if getting ghosted hurts your feelings, you better get used to it.
Amen, sister.
Yeah, it happens, and people get so upset. I'm like, you can't get upset. It happens. There's no way around it. 10 years down the line, it's still gonna happen to you. It happens to me every day. So you just gotta. I know that there's no sugarcoating way to say that. So I just said it as true and plain as it is. In apartment locating, our clients, they literally can look at all this information themselves, kind of. Without us, and without us even being present, they can go look at it on their own, so they technically, they don't really, I guess in a way they do need us, but then there's a way, if they're tech savvy, they can get that information on their own and then go, and they don't ever have to call us. So that means that it's our job to keep them in the loop with us, or show our value and why they want to use us as a locator. The way that we keep in contact is to be constantly following up. Set appointments for your clients is also a good practice to know which communities that they like. With that being said, sometimes, like with being ghosted, let's say they pick 5 places, you've contacted the properties, and then you call the client and they never answer the phone ever again. They may not know that they have to put you down, so they just like, oh, I'm done with my search, I don't need to talk to her anymore, so they just don't answer the phone. But then you have those 5 places, you can call down that list, and just so happened they leased one of them, and you can say, hey, did they put my name down? And they'll say yes or no. And that at least gives you a way to kind of track it down a little bit, versus just saying, oh, I don't know where they let it went. So that's one way. Suggest any move-in specials that you find when you see them, because then that helps them, because that's going to save them a lot of time. When they stop responding for whatever reason, do not take them off your follow-up list. Continue to follow up with them until they tell you they are not interested anymore. I've had clients after a whole month of ignoring me, they've ended up saying that they leased somewhere and they put me down. So do not be shy about blowing up their phone in a gentle way, I suppose. Once your client, this is a good thing about my city, is once your client has leased, set a reminder to contact them 3 months at least before their lease is up to ensure that you're the top of their mind for their next move. They could end up purchasing and you want to be their go-to agent. There's different ways, of course, you can follow up, would it be through call, text, email. You can use carrier pigeons if you want. Those are also effective, just not very cost effective, and they don't make it to their destination because they have, anyways. I'm like, everyone's so
I'm not gonna tell you that I was literally thinking that.
Oh my gosh. Everyone was like listening so intently. Oh my goodness. But also with that, so call, text, email every week. And then once they at least, it's important to get their mailing address because you can send them like a thank you card for moving in, and then in the middle of their lease, send them another card, like a thank you. You could even send them like a $5 gift card to Starbucks or something small just to show your appreciation to them. Say, hey, can I get your mailing address? I want to send you a little something for using our service. And that way you have that information, and then you can follow up with them through mail, because not a lot of people really mail things anymore, like cards and stuff, so it really is a big difference. It sounds like kind of crazy, just like, oh, it's just a card, but sometimes that could be the reason why they could get your card at the very moment that maybe something happened and they had a family member pass away and they are like very distraught, and now they've got to do a probate for this house and they don't know what to do, and your card has just happened in the mail, and they're like, oh thank God, there's an agent that can help me guide me through this process, you know? I mean, that's kind of severe, but it could be any of those things, you know? And it comes in right at the perfect time.
So what I do when I sell a house is I send them a thank you note immediately. Like day they close, I have it ready to go, like with it in their file, and I drop it in the mail. Then I have a box on my desk, and then I go ahead and I fill them out a Christmas card, like something in the spring, something fun, a home anniversary for a year. Like I have all these cards and I keep them. I sign it and I stick it in there. So then in January, I have all the cards ready to go. All I have to do is put stamps on them. I pick them up and I throw them in the mailbox. I've already done the work. It's already there. And it just keeps my name in there. I put a business card in there, and then I stick my business card to a magnet for their refrigerator so that they stick it on there because everybody else needs a magnet, and they see your face every single day.
That's exactly right. That's so true. And you can do it through through snail mail, or there's a thing called send out cards that I've used. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but you can even you can do it electronically. So let's say you get them closed or you lease them an apartment, you can put them in and you can set it up to send them out. Cards on certain days, and you can design the card. You can make it looks like you're writing, and you can put your picture in the back or whatever you want to do, and you can set it up to be kind of like a campaign per se. You can even attach gift cards or different gifts in their little their store that they have, so that it literally mails it to them. So that's one way to do it. If you want to do the tech savvy, you can do it that way, or you can do it the traditional way too.
Everybody likes a handwritten note.
Yeah, definitely. Those things, that's kind of a lost art. So those little things.
And I would send one. I always send a thank you note to the other agent, unless I don't like them.
So,
but if I do like them and they worked hard or whatever, I try to send them I do Chick-fil-A just because that's what I like.
Yes, me too.
And I just send them like a $5 or $10 gift certificate to Chick-fil-A and a thank you card, and I'm just like, hey, thanks for working so hard. And then next time they're like, oh, she's gonna send me a $10 gift certificate.
That's
so
true.
I'm serious.
It's true. It's so simple. But and then another, to kind of piggyback on that. Let's say you have an agent that you work to deal with, and you send them a thank you card, and you just remind, sometimes you might have buyers that are looking for houses that maybe they're looking for under $200,000, and there's just no inventory. If you stay in touch with those agents, sometimes when they have houses that are coming up that are not on the market yet, they might tell you about it, and then you guys can work a deal that maybe that your buyer would not have gotten if that house was put on the MLS and another buyer got it before they did. Sometimes you can get off-market deals like that, and I mean, that happens too.
And sometimes if you're really good to another agent, and let's say there's 10 offers on the table, and they're like, I know that this lady, she works super hard, her paperwork's clean, I know your offer may be the same as somebody else's, or pretty similar, but that the other agent's like, well, she's gonna work a lot harder, I don't know this other agent, and so it can sometimes it can help you in that situation.
It certainly does. You definitely want to have good relationships after you leave a deal, even if maybe the deal didn't go very smoothly. You still don't want to burn that bridge, because then later on, like you said, maybe your buyer's really eager, and just so happened that other agent is the listing agent again, and you're like, oh, okay, this is probably not going to go so well, so it can go both ways. So just be kind to everybody, because then you never know. This is a huge industry, but a very small world. So you're probably going to run into that person again at some point in your career.
It's going to happen. It is going to happen.
We're all here to work, we're all in this thing together, so regardless of where you're working for, we're all doing the same thing, and so it's just important that we're all kind of one big team per se, to help each other. So that's a good point. I want to touch on one small thing. This isn't in regards to the locating, but it's something that just was really huge when it comes to the paperwork. And Miss Cindy's definitely gonna go over, we'll do classes on how to make sure your paperwork is spotless. But for instance, an example, I don't know if I mentioned to you guys, I had an investor that I was working with, and it was a $550,000 house. And I put in an offer, and everything in all my paperwork was completely filled out to a T. I didn't leave anything blank, everything was completely done. I got a call from the listing agent who said, this is a little weird, I've never had this happen before, but I just received the same offer from another agent. Same buyer, everything was the same. And I called the buyer and I'm like, what in the world? You asked me to put you on an offer. And he's like, oh, I called this agent before. And then I told her, never mind. He had some story, of course. But long story short, that other agent gave the deal to me because my paperwork was clean versus the other agent, and that was an $11,000 payday because my paperwork was correct. Even though the other agent had the same paperwork, same client, she went with me, and so I think that was enough to remind me to make sure that I filled out my paperwork correctly because it could literally mean a paycheck or not. So
Yes,
so important.
it's so important.
Even for yes, it's amazing. So yeah, so that's just a little reminder. If that doesn't excite you, I don't know what that is.
The first time you miss out on a $10,000 payday, you're gonna be like, I will never in my life forget to check that box, ever. I can assure you. Or the first time you forget to check a box and you have to buy a refrigerator or a washer and dryer or something like that, you'll be going through that contract and be like, oh, make sure I gotta do this one. I assure you.
It happens to the best of us, and like you said, it only happens once, maybe twice, because you got complacent, but never again. Oh my goodness, so I just had to share that off topic there, but number 6, okay, so this is gonna piggyback, keeping your clients informed. Whenever you're doing your pricing and availability, they only typically know their availability about 60 days out. So let's say your client needs to move in 90 days or maybe the next year. Go ahead and get their information, find out what they're looking for, so that as it gets closer, then you can contact the properties for updated pricing and availability. I let them know that the prices can change daily, so let me know as it gets closer which ones you like, and then we'll contact them for your active clients. Again, ask for preferred employee list because that can help save them some money. To reserve an apartment, the client typically will pay an application fee, an administration fee, which is just a fee that they get paid an hourly rate to do their job, but then they charge another fee on top just to process the application, and so it's a fee that just is there sometimes. So it's an administration fee and a deposit and the application fee. If, let's say, they apply for an apartment and they cancel before they move in, a lot of the times those fees are going to be non-refundable. So just make sure that client knows that if for some reason they change their mind, that they'll not get that money back. But sometimes, let's say they move in, I've seen specials where they have like their move-in costs, like their admin and deposit will be credited to them at move-in. So then it's kind of a different way to do a move-in special. They pay up front, but then they get that credited to them. So it can either be lost or it could be credited to them at move-in. Right, so the next we have quite a lengthy list of things to consider, but we have a few questions online, so I wanted to answer those. Mr. Rolfe asked if we get paid by check or direct deposit. So when you get a client that leases, about 99% of the agents like me to use Zelle because they can just combine it and send it straight over to them. But if you have a preference as far as check or whatever you guys want, I'm usually pretty easy to accommodate, so I try to make it as easy as possible for you guys to get paid. For the send-out cards, there's a few different plans that they have as well. They have like a basic plan, or they have like you can send like 30 cards a month for $30, or they have an unlimited plan. It's $97 a month, but it includes postage, and you can send as many cards as you want, like literally in the mail, postage and everything. So that's what I use, because then I can send out as many as I want to. So that's $97 a month. And there is a referral code if you guys do want to join. Yeah, I can put that in the information as well for the affiliate link if you guys want to do that. But that's just something that I found that's worked pretty well. Okay. So smart locating and ALN, although it can be pretty accurate for the most part in a general sense, it's not always completely accurate, so sometimes it's important to verify with the on-site staff the information that way, because that way you get the most accurate information to the client. When your clients are going to go tour, we mentioned to call ahead before the client goes out to visit them. Sometimes the communities will require an appointment, especially now more than ever. Sometimes they have only virtual tours, or they have to schedule an appointment. They do not allow walk-ins. So you want to check with that property to see what they require. When you're calling a property, Mom can attest to this, try to find out if they're the on-site staff or if it's a call center. Will you tell them your experience?
So I call this company, the apartment community. Then they started asking me questions. And I was like, okay, I went for the first few questions. They just kept asking questions. And I was on the phone for at least 15 minutes answering questions. Only to find out that wasn't the leasing, it was a call center, it wasn't even the leasing center. Then I had to go and redo the whole thing again to the company. Oh, I was so frustrated.
The same thing happened in my previous broker. I was like in the room with her and I'm like, I don't know what's going on, they won't stop. I'm like, it's taking forever. And I'm like, thank you, I gotta go. And they'd ask you more questions.
Yeah.
And it's just funny. And sometimes they sound very much like the leasing staff, so you don't even know. But so you want to find out if it's on site, because the call centers are not as knowledgeable, because they probably don't have a lot of the information. They're just kind of an answering service, Another one. So you'll see sometimes someone will say, I want a loft style apartment. You want to ask them what a loft style means to them, because sometimes the loft that you think is not the same that they think, or vice versa. So just find out because it could be like maybe it's a two level and the top level is completely open, or maybe it's a loft where, like sometimes people might say a studio where it's just like completely open and they might call that a loft. So that's one of the terminologies that we find that kind of has mixed meanings, so I would ask that. You may not run into that a lot, but I just thought that was important to include. One thing when it comes to smart locating as well, I want to mention that let's say you have clients in your list. As you put them in, there's going to be a green dot or a red dot next to their names. And what those dots mean, if it's red, that means that client has contacted another locator. Or they call it a conflict per se. So you can see if they're, how long it's been since they've used another locator. And if they're currently using one, you can call the client and say, hey, I've noticed that you're working with so-and-so, what's the reason why that person didn't work out? Kind of probe it a little bit to see if it's, they might be like, oh, I didn't realize that you were another locator, I'll just use the same person. Or they'll say, you know what, that person didn't do anything for me, I'm not really happy with their services, I want to use you. And so be upfront about it. You don't have to, worry about it. Just be upfront and honest with them.
Does that kind of freak them out when they're like, how did she know?
Yeah, probably. But that way they know that they know that you know.
But the consumer, most of the time the consumers don't realize how it works. I mean, with anything. So they may think that y'all work for the same company. So.
In my experience, let's say you get a conflict. If it's an agent with another brokerage, then it's fair game. If you get a conflict and it's an agent that we work with in our company, then we always call the other agent and say, hey, I see that you worked with this person. Do you want to go ahead and call them back? Or they'll say, oh, that person was a nightmare. You can take him if you want to, So you just kind of talk with them, so that way because like you said, sometimes they don't realize how it works, and they might call 3 or 4 people on Craigslist or something and realize they're all the same company. That's about that. And then move-in specials, you can see that on AON and Smart Locating. Not all of them will be on there, but the properties that are proactive, they'll put that information on there so you can see that. And again, if a community is running a 2-month free special, sometimes they can self-prorate that throughout the lease. Sometimes their companies or communities require that they have it up front. So you want to ask them if they can prorate that themselves, or if that's something that can be done.
On ALN, you can go to the keyword section and type in total move-in, and it will just show you all the ones that are total move-in. be sure to check the date on the bottom of the advertise, or their page. It'll tell when was the last time this was updated. So, and two, if you call them, if it's already been expired, they may be having another move-in special. So, it doesn't hurt to call the apartment complex to see if they're running a special. You know, because they may extend that special, they may do another look-in lease instead of a total move-in. So on ALN, just type in total move-in, and it should bring everything up for you.
Good point. Those keywords are going to be your best friend, because whenever you're doing the search, let's say they have a broken lease or an eviction, you can type in second chance, like for second chance leasing, or the word crime, and then you can see the different things that work with just those things. And again, we'll go over that second, though. It's the number 2 ND for abbreviated for second, and then the word chance is some of the keywords. And again, we'll share that with you so you can have a kind of a what is that called? A legend per se, like kind of all the different terminologies for you guys. Service animals, this is going to come up quite a bit. It says service animals are usually a way around. Most of the time they say, I'll have a service pet, but it's a pit bull. And, you know, or
Yeah, that's happening.
it's, you know, or whatever. It could be, not always it's an aggressive breed, but you find that sometimes that happens. And like, you know, but it's my service animal. So they usually sometimes use that to kind of get around that aggressive breed restriction. Somebody has shared that there's a website called petscreening.com. I haven't went to that site yet, so I'm not sure, but it was someone that when we were going over our notes, I included that. That could be something maybe that can tell you whether or not that's maybe considered an aggressive breed or not.
What was the email again?
Petscreening.com.
Okay.
So that kind of goes over the pets. As far as I was mentioning, sometimes the communities only know like 60 days out for their availability. If your client applies for a brand new community, sometimes they have their availability for a month later because they have a lot of units to fill because they're completely brand new and empty. So you might be able to lease an apartment in June but not move until December, where normally that wouldn't be the case. Commissions, they vary between each community. So in your database, ALN or Smart Locating is going to tell you what the property pays. When you see 100% commission, that means you get 1 full month's rent as a commission for your clients. If you see 50%, that means you get half of 1 month's rent commission. Sometimes you might see a 50% plus a $100 bonus. And so sometimes they'll pay bonuses and different things like that. So you'll see the commission structure whenever you're doing the list initially. So it's not going to be a surprise once they lease and then you're like, oh, I wonder what they're paying. Like you'll know up front what their client or the property is offering to you.
I've seen a 1%.
Yeah, I've seen it where they take the entire rent and then they give you 1% of the total stuff, like the total rent. I've only seen that like with one company. I've never leased anybody like that. It's the weirdest thing. So I don't know, but or they might pay $100 flat fee. I've done that before, you know, because that property has a good deal, but you know, I don't not send it to them. And which the very first lease that I got when I opened up Core One, it was a $100 flat fee. I'll never forget it because then they referred me. I was so excited because I made my first $100, and then they said a few months later they referred me to someone who their commission was $2,400 for that one lease. So I'm like, I'm glad I took care of that $100 person because now I just made $2,400.
I cannot stress that enough. That it doesn't matter what their budget is, what walk of life they're coming from, because just because they're buying or leasing something that's super junky, they may know somebody. You know, I'm telling you, you'll see it.
More often than not. Okay, so some communities, they pay less commission if you just send the property versus if you escort. We talked about that a little bit. Sometimes it's the same. There are very few that say, oh, if you bring them out, we'll pay you more. So just keep that in mind. And it is a numbers game. Do not get discouraged if you don't close every single deal. The goal is to be constantly generating new leads. If you do not depend on the 5 clients that you have right now, you will need to always be working it with at least, I say 30 to 50. That's a very modest number. I would say I typically work with at least 100, 150 people at once, because in that way, you know that if about one out of every 10 people will lease, let's say you work 200 people a month, and you're gonna get probably 20 leases out of that, which if you get, let's just say $1,000 a lease, there's $20,000 in a month that you made from apartment locating, or even half of that if it's 50%. So just keep that in mind, that there are at least 30 to 50 people at all times, and still be lead generating for more. Never turn away someone if they're moving next year, because that's going to be building your pipeline, so you can, once you find that out, then take their information, find out what they're looking for, and then put them into your CRM, and contact them when they're 90 days from their lease ending. This is one of the many ways that you can constantly be lead generating. That's really important. We mentioned talking about extra fees on top of the rent. Make sure you find out about that information, because that is something that will be important.
Just wanted to ask some pet rents. A lot of people forget about pet rent.
Sure.
Because I know when I was looking, I ended up getting a house, but, renting a house, but pet rent, you have to figure it out, because I have 2 dogs. So, it's usually minimal, but if you're like, at your maximum of your, top of your, what you can pay, and then you're like, oh, I forgot about the pet rent.
Someone said, why do I?
Discouraging.
That's true. And I heard someone say, why are you charging my pet rent? They don't even have a job, and they're just freeloading. How are they gonna pay that rent? What the heck? True. It's crazy. Another terminology that you might hear that may not be familiar with. So for the water bill, they're either going to sub-meter the water bill, or they're going to allocate it. And if it's sub-metered, that means that they're going to be billed off of their usage. But if it's allocated, they might take the entire community, divided by how many units they have, and that's your bill. Or it could be based off of how much square footage you have. There's different ways, so you could ask them that. That will just make you look more knowledgeable, and you can tell them, so that way they can expect what type of water bill that they might be having. A few things that are really important whenever you're qualifying a client, which last week we went over a lot of the questions to ask. You're going to need to find out about their credit, rental history, criminal history, and employment. Those things will be verified when they apply for the apartment. So let's say they say they make $20,000 a month, but their paychecks may only reflect $2,000 a month. They're going to verify that, so that way they can tell if you can afford the rent or not. So make sure that you're asking about those things up front to give them the realistic expectations. For the income requirements, I see it typically they require 2.5 times to 3 times the rent before the taxes. So make sure that you're asking them what their gross monthly income is, not their net, because that's what they're going to base their rent that they can afford.
And if they tell you a weekly income, like let's say they make $1,000 a week, it's not 4 weeks in a month, it's 4.3, and that makes a big difference sometimes.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that. Very cool.
Can you repeat that again?
So if they say I make $1,000 a week, and you base it, so you're thinking they make $4,000 a month, well, it's really 4.3 weeks in a month. So then that gives them a little extra. That's how the lenders do it. So make sure to keep that in the back of your mind, because if it's 2 to 3 times, they may be able to technically afford something a little bit nicer and a better community because of that 0.3.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's true. Okay, so remember that. So one of the things also when it comes to the leasing is, let's say